Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. Of course, as always, I'm your wonderful host, Joshua Gitman, and we've got a lot to get into today. We had an amazing day of NBA playoff action yesterday with the Sixers and Knicks, the Bucks and Pacers, and the Magic and Cavs. Absolutely thrilling basketball to watch. Plus, we are going to get into our first few teams of lights out in this postseason. We've got three teams for you today: the Suns, the Pelicans, and the Lakers, and we'll get into that later in the show. But first, as I mentioned, I want to start with yesterday's games, where first, Tyrese Maxey, my goodness, he just saved the Philadelphia 76ers season. It was sort of like a game two for the Knicks and Sixers, but in reverse. This time, the Knicks, instead of the Sixers, looked like they were going to win the game. They were up 6, 30 seconds to go. Knicks fans were standing up. They were celebrating like they were going to the second round. And all of a sudden, it just goes away just like that. And that is the craziest thing to me, that it happened twice in the same series on the same court. Unbelievable. Tyrese Maxey, Philly's down 6. Maxey gets the ball, hits an and-one three, which if you're New York, that is the worst possible thing you can do. Then they foul Josh Hart, which is the right person to foul because it's Josh Hart. He's not that great of a free throw shooter, even though he's improved his shooting in the postseason. He's still not the best free throw shooter. He splits a pair. Then Philly has no timeouts. They got to get it up court. 8 seconds to go. Maxey, instead of taking a closer shot, pulls up from the logo and hits an incredible shot that just absolutely blew my mind. And that was probably the shot of the playoffs. I know Jamal Murray has hit incredible shots as well, but it's just the fact that that shot saved Philly's season. It looked like in that fourth quarter that Philly was going to go home. It looked like their season was over, and then Tyrese Maxey said, not so fast. They went into overtime. The Knicks actually started off pretty good in overtime, being up 5, which is a little surprising considering Philadelphia had all the momentum going into that overtime period. Then all of a sudden, a Philadelphia surge. Tyrese Maxey hits a couple of threes. A huge layup from Kelly Oubre, a couple of stops, and the Philadelphia 76ers hold on and go back to Philadelphia, where they will try to force Game 7 against this New York Knicks team. Unbelievable. That was probably the best game of the postseason. Game 2 in this series could have made the same case, but the fact that this game went to overtime and Maxey had to do what he had to do to save the Philadelphia 76ers season, just an absolute classic game, and one we will probably remember and define this 2024 playoffs as. In this game, Tyrese Maxey, of course, was the star of the game. He scored 46 points, and the Philadelphia 76ers needed all 46 in order to win this basketball game. 17 of 30 from the field and 7 of 12 from the three-point line. And what was interesting about this game was Joel Embiid didn't play great. Joel Embiid didn't have a good game. And even though he's been injured, clearly you can see not fully healthy, it really hasn't been that bad of a postseason for Embiid in this first round. He's had some games. Remember, Game 3 had the 50-point game. He's had 30-point games. But this game in particular, he did not play that well. And it looked like that was going to cost Philadelphia ultimately in this game. But Tyrese Maxey showed that he can be a 1 at points in games. He is not only just a number 2 option, he is a 1A. That man just showed the rest of the basketball world what he is capable to do on the court. And I'm just absolutely shocked at how Maxey collectively scored that many points, considering who's on him, which is Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo, who are both great defenders. In this game, it just looked like Maxey just got whatever he wanted, and it just was shocking because of how good Hart and DiVincenzo are on the defensive side of the ball here for this New York Knicks team. Also, somebody that I think had a huge game that really needed to have one was Tobias Harris for Philadelphia. I criticized him in the last game, saying that he needed to play better. Did he play better in game 5? He absolutely did. He scored 19, more efficient shooting, 7 of 11 from the field, 3 of 6 from the three-point line. He hit a crucial jump shot, I think, when the Knicks were about to go up 7, if I'm not mistaken. I think the Knicks were up 7, and Tobias Harris hit this contested jump shot over Josh Hart to cut the lead to 5, and that really gave Philadelphia a little bit of momentum and a little bit of juice going into the end of the game, because if not, New York would have gotten the ball with the momentum, and that probably would have been over because it would have been a 3-possession game at that point. So Tobias Harris hit some huge and timely shots in this game to keep Philadelphia in it for Tyrese Maxey to take over at the end of the game. And again, for this Philadelphia 76ers team, other than Harris having the above-average game in Maxey and Embiid, nobody else has really stepped up for this Philadelphia 76er team. Batum hasn't played great. Paul Reed hasn't played great. Cameron Payne hasn't done that much in the series other than that Game 3 win. Kelly Oubre has been okay. Kyle Lowry had 0 points today. It's basically Embiid and Maxey and maybe somebody else. And they did get that somebody else today. And as I mentioned in the last episode, Philly needs somebody other than Embiid and Maxey, and today they got that with Tobias Harris, which is what they've been asking Tobias Harris to do for years. Be this number 3 option on this team. That's why they picked you over Jimmy Butler. Of course, that's wrong. Of course, obviously, we know how that ended up. But still, they picked him over Jimmy Butler. They expected him to be the number 3 option on this team and a number 3 on a championship contender team. He has not lived up to that, and in this game, he proved the haters wrong, and he definitely was a huge contribution to the Philadelphia 76ers win. Now going to on the other side to the New York Knicks. You had the opportunity to close it out, and now you have to go back to Philadelphia in a tough environment. Even though Knicks fans do travel to Philadelphia, and we've seen that this series, it's still harder to win on the road, and you just made this a little more difficult, and this could potentially now look like a 7-game series. And when it's a game 7, whether that's at home or on the road, it's one game. Anything can happen in one game. You could have a bad shooting night. And this got very, very scary for the New York Knicks quite fast. And I think in this scenario at the end of the game, it wasn't like the Knicks handed Philadelphia the opportunity to tie like the Philly did to the Knicks with the turnover. But Josh Hart could have hit his free throw. That probably would have sealed the game. But it was just incredible offense by Philadelphia, so you can't really blame the Philadelphia surge at the end of the game. The New York Knicks played solid for most of the second half. Again, just like every other game in the series, Philadelphia got off to a strong start. New York recovered, and New York looked like they had control. Brunson had just a wonderful game again with 40 points, making New York Knicks history. Josh Hart had 18 points, and OG Anunoby had one of his better offensive games in the series with 17. And Deuce McBride had 14 off the bench, and New York only played 7 in this game. And it really looked like at the end of the game, I don't want to necessarily say this, especially in a playoff environment, but the New York looked tired out there. New York looked like they were getting outran, out-hustled, out-toughed at the end of the game. And it looked like they ran a little bit out of gas. And when it got into overtime, when they got that lead, they really hit the brakes and didn't really accelerate and move at the pace that we've seen them do all season. And I think you have to attribute that to Tom Thibodeau. We know Tom Thibodeau really, especially in the regular season and more in the playoffs, likes to run his players to the ground. And we saw it in this game. You've got Josh Hart, even though it was an overtime period and there was a possibility of playing 53 minutes. You know how many minutes Josh Hart played in this game? 53 minutes. And when you're guarding the best player, I don't care how conditioned you are. When you're guarding a player like Maxey, who's one of the fastest, if not the fastest player in the league, going up and down the court, running back and forth the entire game and in overtime period, it's hard. It's hard to be conditioned and hard to be 100% like head on a swivel, full pace. That's difficult. And you really can't blame Josh Hart for letting off the gas a little bit, because it's not easy to play 53 minutes. And then you've got OG Anunoby 50 minutes. Jalen Brunson, 51, Deuce McBride, and like those three guys, even though they've been the three best players this series, you've got to give some of these guys a break. Like your Thibodeau's running them to the ground. And if this could potentially become a problem as we linger and linger now with this Philadelphia win to a potential 7-game series, assuming Philadelphia protects home court. And it's hard to consistently play 48 minutes a game for every other day. That's a difficult task to do. And eventually, the Knicks are not going to be at full energy. And that's been a problem with Thibodeau in the past. Remember, in 2011, 2012, Derrick Rose, the Chicago was up 10 with 3 minutes remaining. Not 3 minutes remaining, with 2 minutes remaining. And I don't think it was 10. I think it was like 13. He decided to play Derrick Rose. And what happened? He got injured. And of course, he's never been the same. He's currently sitting on Memphis on their bench. He looked like he was going to be a multiple-time MVP. He was the youngest MVP of all time, and Thibodeau ran him to the ground and played him more than necessarily he should have, especially in a playoff game, and that cost Thibodeau. Something may happen with these New York Knicks players if you play them for that long, and it's bound to happen. It's hard enough to play them the whole game. But the fact that in a physical series against a physical team like the Philadelphia 76ers, there could potentially be injuries. And Thibodeau not only does this in the postseason, but he does this in the regular season as well. So these players are already feeling a little tired, a little not 100% step in the pedal going into the postseason. Thibodeau needs to find ways to manage the players' minutes, and that's something that he hasn't done. But it may be something he has to adapt to going forward. Now, overall in this game, I mean, New York did what they had to do. New York had a decent game from most of their big guys. DiVincenzo maybe could have had a little bit of a better game, had a bad shooting night, 1 for 7 from beyond the arc. But they played solid defense. I think Maxey just had a great game, and Josh Hart ran out of steam, ran out of juice. The defenders ran out of steam at the end, and Maxey had a game-saving and best performance of the playoffs, arguably so far, and he did basically whatever he could to save Philadelphia's season, and it took basically a miracle for it to happen. And in this playoffs, miracles can happen, and it happened. And if you're New York, you just got to put your head down. You got to go to Philadelphia, and you've got to take care of it, because if Philadelphia wins that in a 3-1 deficit when the team wins 2 straight, the pressure's on you. You do, and it gets to a game 7, you do not want to be the team to blow the 3-1 lead. That is a lot of pressure on you, and you're going to have to perform in game 7 because it's embarrassing, quite frankly, to blow a 3-1 lead. All you have to do is win 1 game in 3 attempts, and with this team having home court advantage, it's 2 games at home and 1 game on the road, so you have more of a chance to even close it out at home. So the pressure's on New York right now, and if New York, I don't care who's been out there, who's been injured, whether that's Randall, now Bogdanovich is out for the season for New York. That was breaking news, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I don't care who's on the court for New York. It is inexcusable to potentially leave the door open for Philadelphia. You did have the game. Maxey had the great performance, and now the pressure's on you. You tip your hat off. Good job, Tyrese Maxey. You had a miracle. You made a miracle happen because of your incredible performance. Now you have to step up on the road and make sure this series is over. That's going to be tough in a Philadelphia environment. It's going to be a tough deal. And now your rotation's basically down to 7 because Bogdanovich is out for the season with the knee and arm issues, which is brutal. And if you're Thibodeau, you're going to have to continue to run these players on the ground. I mean, maybe explore playing Precious Achiuwa potentially in this series. You've got to do something to lessen the load on some of these guys and maybe go big. Maybe try going big with Achiuwa and Robinson. Give Hart and give Hart and OG Anunoby a little bit of a break. You have to if you're Thibodeau. But it's going to be very interesting, this game 6. And probably the crowd's going to be incredible in Philadelphia, and we will see what happens, and we will recap it on Friday if Philadelphia forces a game 7 or if the New York Knicks hold on and win the series. That should be a classic in Philadelphia. But let's move on from that, and let's go to our, what do we call it? The most boring yet most interesting series in this postseason, with the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Orlando Magic. And the Cleveland Cavaliers in Game 5 squeaked past the Magic 104 to 103 in what was a crucial win for the Cleveland Cavaliers, who did not have Jared Allen in this game. And Jared Allen has been arguably the second best player for the Cavaliers in this series, ahead of Darius Garland, only behind, of course, Donovan Mitchell. And it looked like a potential brutal loss for Cleveland in a crucial Game 5 that gives you the edge in the last 2 games, where you only got to win 1 out of 2 games. And this was a crucial one that the Cavs needed to protect home court. So, and have a guaranteed Game 7 at home. Worst case scenario, you get Game 7 at home. And it wasn't looking good, considering the Magic had a lot of momentum, winning 2 straight games in, quite frankly, dominant fashion. And Cleveland had to make a response at home, and they did it on a little bit of both sides of the ball today. It wasn't the typical like the game was in the 80s. There were both teams for the first time this series actually scored 100 points, so that's pretty incredible. So it wasn't really necessarily a defensive sluggernaut game. Some of them were some of the guys on the teams were actually hitting shots in this game, but it was still relatively low scoring for the NBA today. But for Cleveland in this game, Donovan Mitchell, of course, he does what he always does, scoring 28. But the big guy in this game, Evan Mobley, stepped up huge in Jared Allen's spot on the defensive side of the ball, because we know what Jared Allen can provide on the defensive side of the ball. Physicality, great protection at the rim. Nobody wants to go in on Jared Allen. They know what they're going to get when they're attacking the rim, when Jared Allen's under there. Mobley, not necessarily the interior guy. He's one of those lengthy guys who likes to guard a little bit out of the on the outside. He can play inside if he wants to, but he's not as great on the interior as Jared Allen. And he took all the responsibility on the interior and was huge, especially in that fourth quarter. And if you watch the end of the game, Franz Wagner had an opportunity to tie the game going to the rim, and it looked like he was about to tie the game with a wide open layup. And then out of nowhere, Evan Mobley blocks the shot and saves the game for the Cavaliers, when the Cavaliers pretty much, I would say, was in control for most of the second half, had the lead for the most of the second half. And then the Magic made a little bit of a push in the fourth quarter, and it got close, but Cleveland relatively had control, and they were slipping up, and Evan Mobley made that huge block. Cleveland survives, and now they have the opportunity to close out the series in Orlando, and worst case scenario, host a Game 7 on their home floor, which they are undefeated 3-0 in this series. Also in this game, Max Strus had one of his better games for Cleveland, and they absolutely needed every single point, considering Orlando didn't shoot that abysmal from the 3-point line, from the field in this particular game. Strus had 16, was 4 for 10 for beyond the arc. He played pretty solid defense for Cleveland as well against Gary Harris and Jalen Suggs, holding them to a combined 13 points. Gary Harris 0 points in that game, in this game. And Strus has his ups and downs, but when Strus gets it going, Strus can really get it going for this team, and that was essential for Cleveland in this one. But somebody who I thought was very important for this, or for the Cavaliers team, coming off the bench, who they signed in the waiver wires, was Marcus Morris Sr. Marcus Morris has not really played for Cleveland this year. When he got signed, he's really been an in and out of the rotation guy, depending on who's in, who's out of the game. And we've seen what he's done before. We know how good he was with the Clippers, the Celtics. We've seen Marcus Morris shine in the postseason before. And with the Jared Allen injury, Marcus Morris got some opportunity to play today to play at the forward spot. And he was huge on the defensive side of the ball. He ran some of the offense for Cleveland. And he was just that veteran leader who provided Cleveland with energy on both sides of the ball today. And at points when Orlando was making their runs, Marcus Morris was clapping his hands to the Cavaliers. Marcus Morris was getting people aside, talking in their ear. Marcus Morris was showing his veteran leadership in this game. And not only did he do that, he had 12 points, shot decently well, 4 for 9, 2 for 5 from the three, and just made a huge impact on Cleveland on and off the court today. And it just really stood out to me. And I think JB Bickerstaff should probably consider playing Marcus Morris a little more, because we've seen what he's done in the postseason before. And we also know that he's a veteran and can provide great leadership for a relatively young Cleveland Cavaliers team. And I think he did his role today, score off the bench, hit some timely shots, and provide the leadership that this Cleveland Cavaliers team doesn't really have other than him and maybe Tristan Thompson. So I thought he was a huge factor in the win. And if he can consistently play decent for Cleveland and be a factor off that bench in the next two games, I think Cleveland should close it out, because I do think they have the better team, and I do think they should close it out with home court advantage. I'm still going with Cleveland in 7 in this one, and that's my pick, and I'm going to stick with my pick. I think the Magic will come back and win Game 6 before Cleveland wins Game 7. And in this game for Orlando, Paolo Banchero had a great bounce back game from Game 4, where he only scored 9 points. Today, he kept Orlando in the game when it looked like Cleveland was going to pull away. Paolo Banchero had 39 in this game, 14 for 24 shooting, 4 for 7 from the three-point line, and he was hitting his threes today just like he did in Game 3, which opened up the offense for him a little more, getting 17 attempts inside the paint for Paolo Banchero today, which is one of the most he's ever done in his career. And again, I said this earlier, if Banchero can hit those threes, it opens it up for him in the drives. And I noticed when he hits the threes, he doesn't even have to hit all of them. If he hits 40% of his threes, the game will flow much easier for Banchero, and the floor will open up for him, because they're going to have to contest the three-point shots. And we know how good Banchero is on the drive, and he showed that today. But other than Banchero today, not a lot of people from Orlando showed up overall. Wagner, unlike he did last game where he scored 30-something points, he didn't have a great game today, only scoring 14, and of course had the opportunity to tie and didn't. Wendell Carter was a no-show. Gary Harris had 0. Jalen Suggs had 13. And nobody really off the bench made that big of a contribution for this Orlando team. And it's a little bit surprising how all of a sudden at home they were playing way better on the offensive side of the ball. And now they just don't look good. And the saying goes, role players play better at home and not on the road. And the fact that Orlando continues to show that they cannot win in Cleveland is a little bit of a concern, because you don't have home court the rest of the series. And even if you do win Game 6, which you got to win that one, you've got to come back to Cleveland and play Game 7. And Paolo Banchero and Wagner, when he actually steps up, are going to need help, because we know this Orlando Magic team, again, they don't have great offense, and somebody's going to need to step up. It could be Jalen Suggs. It could be Cole Anthony. It could be the other Wagner brother. It could be Gary Harris. Who knows? But somebody has to help this Orlando team, because their offense, just like Cleveland, is absolutely abysmal. And Cleveland today got the help from Max Strus. Donovan Mitchell got Max Strus's help today. Who is it going to be for Paolo Banchero? And you're going to have to come back here and win a game. And I don't see that happening from the way you've been playing in Cleveland. So they've got to regroup. They've got to win Game 6, and they've got to have a great game plan and set their guys up to have great offensive shots, great offensive looks, and opportunities in a crucial Game 7 if they get to that point. But let's move on from that game, and let's go to the Denver Nuggets game, where the Denver Nuggets have officially won their series after losing game 4 because Jamal Murray hit yet another game winner. This time it wasn't at the buzzer, but it was another game winner as the Nuggets defeated the Lakers 108 to 106 in another classic game. In this game, what do you know? The Lakers led at the half and they lost once again for the 4th time in 5 games. And what was incredible about this series, we're going to get into Lights Out Lakers later in the show. Don't you worry about that. What was incredible about the series was the Lakers led 3/4 of the series. It was incredible. I don't think I've ever seen a team who's led for 3/4 of the series and yet should have gotten swept. And they got gentlemen swept. Have you ever seen that? Because I haven't. That is mind-blowing. And that just really is embarrassing if you're the Lakers, both the players and the coaching staff. How can you consistently blow leads in the second half to the same team over and over and over again? They only held on to the lead once, and now it looks like changes will be made in LA, which we will talk about, as I mentioned later. And they just don't have enough. I mean, you've got LeBron, 30 points, just like he always does. Anthony Davis had a great physical first half, but once again, just like in most of the games, great first half, no show in the second half. D'Angelo Russell, been inconsistent once again, 6 for 15 shooting, 2 for 10 from the three-point line. Just an absolute terrible game once again in the postseason for D'Angelo Russell, who I've already critiqued so far, and he hasn't lived up to what he's done in the regular season. Hachimura, 6 for 15. Austin Reeves was one of the only players who really helped LeBron. He had probably his best game of the series in the last 2 games, 6 for 11 shooting in this one, 19 points. And then other than that, it was LeBron and Austin Reeves in the second half, and nobody else really decided to help. I mean, it's incredible how they keep on blowing and blowing these leads, and they had opportunities once again to close out this game. It was 104 to 103 with 133 to go. It was 106 to 106 with 26 seconds to go, and the Lakers could just not get a stop, and they just let Jamal Murray dominate, and it's because D'Angelo Russell is guarding Jamal Murray, and D'Angelo Russell's not a great defender, and I'm really D'Angelo Russell deserves all the critique. I'm sorry. You cannot give this man an excuse. Not playing consistent in the postseason on the offensive side of the ball, which is all we've been critiquing, me and the entire NBA fanatics. But it's not only that, it's the defensive side of the ball as well. He's letting Jamal Murray have these great games. I know Jamal Murray elevates in the playoffs, but when you see D'Angelo Russell on the other side and you're Jamal Murray, I'm not scared of that. I'm not scared. Who's scared of D'Angelo Russell? Not me. I'm attacking, getting to my shot, trying to draw fouls, and it's like, oh, here we go. I got this matchup in the bag if I'm Jamal Murray. And for 5 games, he had the matchup in the bag. Give credit to Jamal Murray, but it's like D'Angelo Russell's not a great defender. And you're barely playing Gabe Vincent, and Gabe Vincent hasn't really had this great offensive production, but when D'Angelo Russell's shooting 6 for 15, you might as well put Vincent in there for defense, because when Vincent was actually in the game, he was guarding Jamal Murray pretty decently well. And I don't care how many points Gabe Vincent scores. You need to find a way to stop Jamal Murray if you want to win this series. Well, now it's too late because you didn't do that, but if you wanted to, you had to find a way to stop Murray. And D'Angelo Russell wasn't getting the job done, and Gabe Vincent showed he was a more favorable matchup for the Lakers, and the Lakers didn't put Gabe Vincent in the basketball game. And I just quite frankly don't understand why. But the Lakers just, this is just absolutely sad. This season has been rated by Denver. Opening night, they lost to Denver. Kobe's statue, they lost to Denver. LeBron, 40,000 points, they lost to Denver. This playoff series, 2 game winners by Jamal Murray and lost to Denver. Once again, they've lost 12 out of their last 13 to Denver. Have you ever seen that before? Have you ever seen LeBron lose 12 out of 13 games to a single organization, no matter how good that other organization is. And it's not LeBron's fault. I'm just saying it. That just shows you how bad of a supporting cast Rob Pelinka has surrounded LeBron with. This team cannot shoot. They shot 28% from the three in this game. This team cannot, quite frankly, defend other than Anthony Davis and LeBron James and maybe Gabe Vincent, but he wasn't really healthy this season. And this team doesn't have any chemistry. You see players not huddling up. You see people complaining about the coach. You see the coach complaining about a starter. This team is dysfunctional right now, and there needs to be major changes for this basketball team. And we'll get to that in our Lights Out segment later in the show. But for now, this is disgraceful for the Lakers. Absolutely disgraceful. But now going to the positive side, the winning side, the Denver Nuggets, Jokic, of course, another great game, 25, 20, and 8 and 9, almost another triple-double as he usually does. Michael Porter Jr., shout out to him. He has been looking like the third best player in the series, and Michael Porter Jr. was one of the huge reasons why Denver got on that playoff run, and he has been consistently knocking down his shots. And especially his three-pointers, 5 for 7 from the three-point line in this particular game, hitting most of Denver's threes, 5 out of 16 of Denver's threes in this game. And Michael Porter Jr. has just been that big of an offensive threat for Denver. And then if you're the Lakers now with your terrible defense, you've got to collapse on Porter, and it just opens up opportunities for the Lakers, not the Lakers, the Nuggets, to give the ball to Jokic without getting double teamed because Porter's a threat out there. And then Gordon's in the dunker spot, and Gordon may get a wide open three, even though Gordon's not the best shooter. You still don't want to give any player a wide open three. It just opens up the offense for the Denver Nuggets. And if Porter continues to play this way, I expect Denver to make it out of the Western Conference and do much more than that. And then, quite frankly, again with Denver, the bench hasn't really had to do anything in this series. They'll have to do stuff potentially in the next series against Minnesota, which we will preview on Friday's episode. But for now, we're not going to do that quite yet because the series doesn't start until Friday. But the bench hasn't really done anything in this series, and they didn't really. It's mostly just been Denver starters, and it's been Jokic, Porter, and Murray. KCP's been up and down. Gordon has had a game or two, but it's mostly been those three guys, and the Lakers could just not stop those three guys. And they've had second half collapses. That's why they lost this series. Denver moves on. They'll play a much more formidable opponent in the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that should be an exciting series, which we will preview, as I said, next episode. But let's go on to the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, switching from number 2 to number 1. The Oklahoma City Thunder make history as they become the youngest team ever. I'll repeat that. The youngest team ever to 1, win a playoff series, and 2, sweep a playoff series as they sweep the New Orleans Pelicans 97-89 was the game 4 score as Oklahoma City in a tight, close battle with New Orleans as New Orleans tried to fight strong and tried to save their season. Oklahoma City pulled away at the end of the fourth quarter, outscoring the Pelicans 27-18 in that particular quarter, winning this game by 8 points behind Jalen Williams and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, both scoring 24 points apiece. And those two have just been superstars for this Oklahoma City Thunder team. And they've really just astounded me in the way they have been playing basketball this season. And it looks like from the way they play this series, they can do a little bit more than I said and just making the second round. They can do a little bit more than that and potentially be in the Western Conference Finals, potentially make the NBA Finals. This team has the potential. I'll say it. I was wrong with them. I was wrong. I thought this team was too young, going to have a little bit of jitters, not really going to play that great. Let this Pelicans team get a couple of games in this series, make it a little bit interesting. But no, they swept them. And even though Zion was out, it's still very hard to sweep a basketball team. Very, very hard. And considering that Oklahoma City OKC had to fight to victory in game one, which was tough. Their first game with the jitters, that was one that the Pelicans should have won and the Thunder stole. And then this game, the Pelicans looked like they were having control of this game, and the Thunder came back and stole this game. It could easily be 2-2 right now, but the Thunder have proven to play good in the clutch. And if you are a playoff team and you're on the other side, that's scary. And if you're the Thunder, that's exactly what you need to do in order to win playoff games, because it gets a lot harder. It gets a lot tighter going into the fourth quarter, going into crunch time. And it's hard to win crunch time games. And the fact that this young Oklahoma City Thunder team is doing exactly that shows that they are not just a second round team. They can do just like Denver, just like Minnesota, much, much more. And it's really hard to pick who's going to win the West. It's really, with those three teams, it's just really, really hard. And the fact that all those teams have been dominating, it's incredible to see. It's a beautiful thing to see. And also in this game for Oklahoma City, Josh Giddey, Chet Holmgren had 14 in this game for each. They had 14 each. Chet Holmgren once again playing incredible defense against Valanciunas, against Larry Nance Jr., really protecting that paint for OKC. Also, Josh Giddey had a couple of huge shots going down the stretch in the fourth quarter, shot 4 for 6 from 3. He was big in this game. And for the Thunder, it's really been their starting five who's really had the major contributions. Their bench hasn't really played that great in this playoff series. It's been Holmgren, Williams, Shea, Giddey, and Dort. Those have been the five that have been consistent. And if you have 5 consistent players in the playoffs, unlike a couple of teams, you can make it far. And this team has just mind blown me. I don't care who's on the court. I don't care whether Zion's out, whether McCollum and Ingram are not playing great. It's very hard to sweep a team. It's very, very hard to do it. And the fact that they only scored 97, they didn't have a great offensive game. They shot 30% from the three and 42% from the field. They didn't have the best offensive game, but they had their best defensive game of the series, holding a team to 89 points in 2024. We just don't see that anymore in 2024. And the Thunder, even with their dominant offense, has shown that they can dominate on the defensive side of the ball as well. And that is what they proved in this particular basketball game. And if you can do that and prove you can win on both sides of the ball, you are a championship contender. And it's pretty incredible to say how this OKC Thunder team is a championship contender. And they're moving on, and they're going to play the winner of the Clippers and the Mavericks, and we'll see who comes out of that. It's 2-2 currently. Game 5 is tonight in Los Angeles, and we'll see how that series turns out. That should be a great series no matter who wins that series, because this Thunder team's hungry. Even though those other two teams have the star power, this Thunder team will be hungry, and they will have home court advantage, and they're coming off a sweep, more rest than the other teams, and it should be a thriller in the second round, just like the other series. This Western Conference, this Wild Wild West, has been something that we have, the dominance we have not seen, quite frankly, in a very long time in the National Basketball Association. Going to the Pelican side, though, once again, Brandon Ingram, a no-show. CJ McCollum played pretty decent for this Pelicans team in this game, 20 points. They are scoring like basically 1/4 of the points. Valanciunas had a pretty solid game for them as well with 19 points. But Brandon Ingram, once again, no show. What's going on with Brandon Ingram? He had a solid regular season, and then now he's just missing shots. Credit to Lou Dort for playing incredible defense. I know Lou Dort's a great defender, but we know what Brandon Ingram can do. This man was an all-star in 2021, right? He was an all-star. And now he scored 8 points in an elimination game. And in his last couple of games, he's had 8, 19, 18, and 12. That's not going to cut it. This postseason, you cannot average 14 points when you're supposed to be the best player. It's not going to cut it. It's really not going to cut it for this basketball team, and that's why you got eliminated. You didn't play good, and if you had 2 decent games against OKC, especially in that first and this recent game, this series, like I just mentioned, could be 2-2, but Brandon Ingram did not step up. As I said, credit to Lou Dort and the Thunder defense, but we know what Brandon Ingram's capable of, and he didn't do it. And again, this Pelicans team has an issue on the bench. They don't have depth as well. Jose Alvarado, Jordan Hawkins, no show. And it's hard to play Jordan Hawkins because he's a rookie, and it's hard to play rookies in the postseason. Najee Marshall was solid, and he was the only guy off the bench who's been pretty much consistent for the Pelicans all season long. Larry Nance, 6 points, really a no-show for them. This Pelicans team, we'll get into it a little bit later as we talk about them, as we say lights out to them later. They just don't have enough. They just don't have enough, and a move will have to be made with one of their core guys. Definitely not Zion, because Zion played great this season, but something's going to happen. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's move on to the final game that we are going to discuss, which is the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, where they did defeat the Miami Heat, taking a 3-1 lead, 102-88. But in this particular basketball game, Kristaps Porzingis got injured, and he will be out, according to sources. I think Tim Bontemps reported this story. Multiple games, many games, a significant amount of games. I think it was, the word was a significant amount of games. The vocab's important in that. Porzingis will be out for a significant amount of games. Does this change anything in the series? Probably not. Boston should close it out, but you never know. You never know. Spo now can maybe potentially expose a weakness without Porzingis on the court. You never know. But in reality, Boston should still close out this series. But that's not the question. The question is, what does the injury mean for Boston? It means you have to be worried, because Kristaps Porzingis has had injury issues in the past. And here we go again. Healthy in the regular season, showed some hope. He actually may be healthy for an entire season and postseason. Up. Here we go again, another injury. I don't care how it happened. I do not care how it happened. It's another injury for Kristaps Porzingis, and that's ultimately what part of the critiques were when getting Porzingis, because he's an injury machine. And now you're sitting in a situation where you are missing him for potentially this series. And if Miami makes it interesting, who knows? Who knows? They shouldn't. As I mentioned, they shouldn't. And this series should be over tonight. But if it does, who knows? And maybe whoever wins that Cleveland-Orlando team, when you've got Jared Allen and Evan Mobley attacking, who will now be starting, a 38-year-old Al Horford, can take advantage of Al Horford and potentially maybe steal a game in Boston. Who knows? Who knows what can happen for this Porzingis injury? And it's not only Boston being exposed on the defensive side of the ball. Porzingis is really open stuff on the offensive side of the ball, because it's like, remember, when Tatum drives or Brown drives and beats their defender, and people are going to have to double team them, Porzingis now picks and pops to the basket off the screen and roll or off the action. And the fact that he can hit shots makes him unguardable, because he's just that darn tall, where you can't even contest him, even if you do recover to his shot. So this really is a brutal loss for Porzingis. Obviously, Al Horford is much older and much less versatile. Even though he plays a similar game to Porzingis, he's just not as good as Kristaps. And this could be a very lingering loss going down the stretch. And it could have been much worse for Boston. It could have been an Achilles injury, but it is not an Achilles injury, most likely according to sources. But again, this is a concern for Boston, because if Porzingis now has this injury lingering on him in a potential final series, a potential conference final series, this gives Boston a disadvantage. And you've got no seasons to waste if you're Boston. I don't care how old Tatum and Brown is. I don't care what they say about the age of Tatum and Brown. You've been doing this for years now, and it's time to win. It's time to go out there and win. You've got the best team in the league. It's not even close. It's time to go out there and win. And the fact that Porzingis now is going to limit potentially that possibility is huge. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And questions will be raised about that. And we'll see how Boston plays without him, and we'll see how Boston adjusts without him. They better close out this series in Game 5, because remember what happened last year, where Boston was supposed to close out the series in Game 5 in the first round against Atlanta, and Atlanta stole that game, and they forced 6 when Atlanta, quite frankly, is just not a very good basketball team and not very talented. This Miami Heat team is a decent basketball team, but their guys, Butler, Rozier, and now Jaquez is reported to be out in Game 5 as well for Miami. They're just completely injury depleted, so their roster's just not talented without those guys. And you should close out the series. And if you don't close out the series, if you're Boston, questions will be raised. Did Miami find something without Porzingis? I don't know. Again, I'm saying Boston should win, and I expect them to close out this series. But if they don't, could the questions linger again? Could Miami figure out something at home? Figure out something, as I mentioned, without Porzingis? Could Miami have a hot shooting night in Game 6 and force a Game 7? Because my rule for Game 7, I don't care how good the other team is compared to your team. It's one game. Anything can happen in one game. I don't care if it's on home, it's on the road. It's one game. Anything can happen. It's like March Madness. One game, anything. Upsets are possible. Upsets are definitely possible. But it's not only this series, as I mentioned, it's other series too, and it's definitely a concern going down the stretch in this playoff run for Boston. And Al Horford better step up, or else questions will be raised, 100%. But going back to this particular series, though, Boston has pretty much dominated this series. Game 4, they won 102-88, and quite frankly, it wasn't even them It wasn't even them dominating. It was them dominating games 1 and 3, the first two games they won. But in this Game 4, they really didn't dominate. Miami had opportunities to win this basketball game, but they shot an abysmal 27.5% from 3, 9 for 33. And most of the game, they were 20% until a late stretch at the end of the game. Miami was down 29, if I'm not mistaken, and they cut it to 13 with 5 minutes to go. And they called a controversial flagrant foul with Bam Adebayo. And I just didn't really understand that call because Tatum was shooting the ball for no reason at all, but I'm not going to get into that because I don't really want to put bias into it. But I didn't really understand that call. That really changed the momentum, and Miami just lost it after that, and Boston pulled away and closed out that game. And in that particular game, Derek White, man. Derek M. effing White had, I think, his best game of his postseason career. And Boston could not generate offense in this game. Tatum, 5 for 14. Porzingis, when he was playing, 1 for 5. Drew Holiday, 4 for 10. Jaylen Brown, 7 for 18. Hauser, 0 for 2. Pritchard, 0 for 4. And Derek White, man. Derek White, 15 for 26 from the field, 18 for 15 from the three-point line. He hit 8 threes, and Boston needed almost all of them. And if it wasn't for Derek White, this game could have been very, very interesting, even with Miami having the abysmal offense. And they're lucky Miami didn't have a great offensive game because Miami, if they just made a couple more of their threes, probably were going to be in this basketball game. And they're lucky that happened. And Derek White really saved them in this game. And things could have really gotten scary if it wasn't for Derek White. And that's the beauty about this Boston team. It could be Tatum having a great game one day. It could be Porzingis having a great game. Drew Holiday having a great game. Derek White and Jaylen Brown, so on and so on. That's the beauty of the Celtics team. And in this particular game, it was Derek White. And Derek White just could not miss, and they relied on him. And that's what makes Boston so scary because they have so many offensive threats, and you just cannot stop them. And as I mentioned for Miami, they didn't shoot the ball well, and they pretty much screwed themselves over in this game. But you got to give credit to Derek White for basically carrying the Celtics team, and now they have the opportunity to close it out, and they better because questions will be raised, as I mentioned. There's definitely pressure on them. Before we move to our lights out segment, though, I want to get to our final game that we did not talk about, which happened yesterday, was that the Milwaukee Bucks, without Giannis and without Dame, find a way to stay alive and live another day. And they force a Game 6 on Indiana, and now Indiana only leads the series 3-2 as the Bucks dominated in the third period, winning 115-92 against the Indiana Pacers. In this game, exactly what I said needed to happen. Some players are going to have to step up for the Bucks, and Chris Middleton stepped up in a big way. 29 points, huge, just like he was in Game 4. Maybe we're seeing that Chris Middleton player that we saw in 2021 when he won the championship with Milwaukee and when he looked like the second or third guy on a championship team. This is the Chris Middleton that's playing currently right now that I need to see with Giannis and with Dame on the court, because if we get that Chris Middleton with both of those guys on the court when they come back healthy, they can give the Celtics a run for their money if they were to get there. But of course, they still have to win this series. They're down 3-2. And what's interesting about this is Dame and Giannis coming back? When are those two coming back? Because if these two were to come back in game 6, maybe one of them, maybe Giannis comes back game 6, maybe only Dame comes back game 6, but it gives the Bucks a boost and a potential opportunity to force a game 7 going back home, getting all the momentum. I said this in last episode, just like for the Sixers, and I was especially more empathetical on it for this Milwaukee Bucks team. I think, and I still believe, this Milwaukee Bucks team will come back from the 3-1 deficit. I think that if Giannis and Dame are healthy, at least one of them are out there, and for game 7, both of them, if they will win the series. Milwaukee has the better team. Indiana's young. Indiana's inexperienced other than Siakam. And ultimately, I think when Milwaukee has their guys healthy, which will be soon, according to multiple sources, they have the best 2 players, if not sometimes, the way Chris Middleton has been playing lately, the best 3 players on the court. And what was interesting about this game for Milwaukee, going back to the game in particular, this was the first time ever, I'll repeat that, the first time ever that a team who did not have their top 2 scorers with the Bucks, Giannis and Dame, won a playoff game. Ever. Which is astonishing, and you really have to give props to Chris Middleton. Bobby Portis, who also played great with 29. Malik Beasley with 18. Patrick Beverley had one of his better offensive games with 13 points. Was an astonishing Patrick Beverley. Plus 36, and he locked Tyrese Halliburton down, only allowing him to get 16 points and allowing a red-hot Pacers offense to only score 92. So you got to give credit to Patrick Beverley, along with the rest of the Bucks players, for their contributions on the defensive side of the ball, because holding that Indiana team, the one we've seen all season, to 92 points is a pretty incredible feat there. And if you're Milwaukee, you've got 5 guys who stepped up on offense this game. The bench didn't really do a lot, but the guys who were starting made major contributions, and all were huge reasons why the Bucks won this basketball game, in particular Chris Middleton. And if the Bucks can just get this production from these guys with Giannis and with Dame on the court, it's just scary. This is the team that we thought would be surrounding Giannis and Dame to start the season. We need to see this team going forward for Milwaukee, especially if they have any hopes at making the finals, and if they have any hopes of, quite frankly, getting out of this first round. Because remember, they are still down 3-2, and it is still hard to come back down from 3-2. Even though I think they will do it, it is still hard to do that. Now for Indiana's side, this one is brutal. Brutal for one reason and one reason only. You had the prime opportunity to close this team out. No Giannis, no Dame. You've got all the momentum going on your side. You've won 2 straight, and you lost. You lost, and you got smacked out of their gym. And now one of the guys are probably going to come back, if not both, for the crucial Game 6, which will be much more difficult to win. And if it were to get to the case where it will be a Game 7, now you're going to have to win that on the road. Indiana just shot themselves over because they just really missed a prime opportunity to close out this series, and nobody showed up on the offensive side of the ball for Indiana. They weren't hitting the same shots that they were hitting all year. They were abysmal from the 3-point line. Milwaukee found defensive schemes to stop their offense. This was brutal for Indiana, and for how good they were in those wins, for how good they were in Game 2, Game 3, Game 4, all of those games. This one means way more than those 3. It is the hardest win to close out a series. The hardest win is when you close out a series, and Indiana had a prime opportunity to do that in this game, and they did not take advantage of that, which is why we are sitting here in what is a crucial Game 6 and what I think Milwaukee will win. It will be very interesting going on the stretch, going back to the Philly and Knicks series as well, because there is potential to have 2 3-1 teams down 3-1, forcing a Game 7, potentially have 2 teams come back from 3-1. The possibility is still open. But it's finally that time. Let's move on to our lights out segment, and let's first start with our most popular team probably in the league, the Los Angeles Lakers. The Los Angeles Lakers, of course, lost to Denver on the Jamal Murray buzzer beater, as we discussed earlier. This Lakers team, they have a lot to think about this offseason. Let's start with their free agents. Their free agents include unrestricted Taurean Prince, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Harry Giles III. LeBron James, D'Angelo Russell, Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish, and Christian Wood all have player options. And Max Christie, Colin Castleton, and Skylar Mays are all restricted free agents. So the Lakers got a lot of players who are entering free agency, a lot of players who were key in their rotations this year, considering the significant amount of injuries the Lakers had. The question is, do you move on from some of those guys? Do you move on from guys like Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish, and Christian Wood, who really didn't give you that much, and try to get other players and get more out of them for similar money? And that's difficult to decide because we've seen the Lakers ever since 2020 swap in and out different players, and it just hasn't really clicked for the Lakers. There just hasn't been any guys that the Lakers can afford with paying LeBron, with paying Anthony Davis's contract, that can really legitimately surround those two and provide them the roster that was needed for them to win a title once again after 2020. And they lost Caruso to free agency. They lost in the 2020 roster. They lost Rondo. They lost, they traded Kuzma for Westbrook. It just, the only way you can get better if you're the Lakers is you're going to have to make a trade. And they are going to need, in my opinion, a starting point guard because, as I mentioned before, D'Angelo Russell, past 2 years, has not proven it in the playoffs, and he cannot be your team's starting point guard. It just can't. You just cannot have that guy as your starting point guard. You've seen what he did in the playoffs. He is not the person to surround LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the court. He's just not, because he's not going to elevate his game and not going to give LeBron and Anthony Davis easier opportunities, and he's not going to set them up to succeed. And that's the point guard's job, and D'Angelo Russell hasn't done that on the offensive end nor the defensive end as well. So they're going to have to move on from him. I don't know if he accepts the player option and the Lakers tried to trade him. They just let him walk in free agency. But something's got to change. And if I had to pick a change for the Lakers, it's definitely D'Angelo Russell moving. But right now, that's not even the biggest of the Los Angeles Lakers problems going into the offseason. They have a player who, his name is LeBron James, and will be entering free agency, and that could get interesting because if LeBron declines that player option, he will be entering free agency for the first time since 2018. And this Lakers team hasn't really done anything in a few years, and LeBron is going to have to put some thought into his future in the NBA, not necessarily retirement, even though that is on the table, but exploring another team. And LeBron has said it in multiple press conferences after the Lakers were eliminated, and he even tweeted it. I have not decided where I will be next season, which is interesting because he's opening the door for other teams to potentially step in, potentially convince LeBron in free agency to join their team. And there are a lot of teams, quite frankly, every team could use LeBron James, but there are a lot of teams who are in that category, whether that's in the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference, that feel like they're this one player away from hanging in with the top dogs in the conference and being a conference and championship contender. And there are plenty of teams like that, and LeBron may be in a better situation with one of those teams and have an opportunity to win a ring, because the one thing LeBron wants is to win championships. He's one of the greatest of all time, and he wants to maximize his career by winning titles. And he may not necessarily have the opportunity to do that with the Lakers. And quite frankly, I don't think he does, the way this Lakers roster is currently constructed and the way the future situation looks for the Lakers. They can't really make that many trades because of the Anthony Davis trade. They don't have a lot of first-round picks. They sent the first-round pick to Utah for Russell Westbrook. They don't really have a lot. And giving Utah Russell Westbrook with the first-round pick, they just don't really have a lot of options to trade. If you're the Lakers, you don't have any draft picks in this draft. You don't really have a lot of trading chips except for Austin Reeves. And I don't think the Lakers can really move on from Austin Reeves because he's their best youngest asset. And there's just nothing anyway, even if they do decide to move on from Austin Reeves, that the Lakers can really turn him into. There's just really no player that has that value of Austin Reeves because they can't throw first round picks with Austin Reeves because they don't have anything. But players I would like to see personally be on the Los Angeles Lakers, somebody like Trae Young. Give Trae Young a guy like LeBron James. Give Trae Young a guy like Anthony Davis. Have him set up with AD. And he can score the ball. And we know and we've seen what he's done in the playoffs before. If the Lakers could potentially get him, I don't know how, but if they could get him, that's a guy who I trust more than D'Angelo Russell, even with the bad defense. The Lakers can Lakers can manage that. They definitely need a point guard, and I would like to see Trae Young on that Los Angeles Lakers team. I would also like to see potentially another backup big to help Anthony Davis, help the Los Angeles Lakers, because when you're facing against great big men in the West, you're going to need some versatility at that backup center spot, considering we've seen AD's history with his health. And you've got guys in the Western Conference now, Karl-Anthony Towns, Gobert, and Minnesota, Holmgren in OKC. Of course, you've got Nikola Jokic in Denver. There are a lot of big men in the Western Conference, and the Lakers just can't be mauling AD to the ground in the regular season. So if you're the Los Angeles Lakers, you're going to have to consider getting a backup center. Also for the Lakers, coaching, fire Darvin Ham. Fire Darvin Ham today. He needs to be fired today because clearly, as we've seen, the players are taking shots at Darvin Ham. Darvin Ham is taking shots at players. It's just not working out right now, and you can't have that if you're the Los Angeles Lakers going forward. So you're going to have to find a way to get a new coach. I think personally the Lakers should go out for Mike Budenholzer, a coach that is experienced, a coach that has all-star capability, an all-star coach, a coach that has championship experience, a coach that can be a leader for a team that's desperately trying to find ways to win basketball games, and someone who can really set them up well on the defensive side of the ball. So I think Mike Budenholzer would be an ideal candidate for the Lakers. And also, look out for J.J. Redick with the Lakers as well if they were to fire Darvin Ham, which is expected. Look out for J.J. Redick, the rising media guy, the former shooting guard for the Clippers, Pelicans, Magic, Mavs, he played, and Sixers. Look out for him because he has had some interesting coaching with the Hornets, but we know that LeBron and JJ Redick have done their podcast Mind the Game together. So look out for potentially that. If LeBron potentially stays with the Lakers and they're looking at coaches, that could be on the table if LeBron says, hey, this guy's a smart guy. He can help us lead this team along with me because I'm lead GM. Why not? Why not JJ Redick? He'll help him shooting. He'll help the Los Angeles Lakers shoot the ball. So look out for him. I would say he's more of a dark shot, but I would really like Mike Budenholzer to be with the Lakers going forward. But let's move on from the Lakers and let's go to the New Orleans Pelicans, as the Pelicans got swept by the Oklahoma City Thunder. They did not win a game in this postseason. They had opportunities to tie the series, as I mentioned earlier, but of course, they did not, and now we are here sitting at their lights out segment for the New Orleans Pelicans. They had an overall, I would say, relatively solid season. They were in that 5-6 slot for most of the season. They dropped to 7. They lost the play-in to the Lakers. Then they got to 8. Of course, Zion was injured in that play-in game against the Lakers, and that could have changed things, maybe for the worse, depending on how they would have played against Denver, but with Zion Williamson, but who knows? And they got swept by a young, hungry Thunder team who just straight up outplayed them without Zion. And you can't really blame New Orleans for that because Zion has been their best player this season, and he has played, quite frankly, the best season of his career. He's played the most games in a very long time, and he's really proven to himself, especially in that Lakers play-in game, that he is a top guy that you can have on a roster. He is somebody that you can build around, especially if he continues to stay healthy like he did this season. Now, for the Pelicans, they have a couple of free agents, Unrestricted free agents include Najee Marshall, who had a solid season for New Orleans off the bench, Jonas Valanciunas, who had his up and downs, Cody Zeller. Restricted free agents include Matt Ryan and Deron Sabran, and team options for the Pelicans. Jose Alvarado has a team option, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl has a team option for the New Orleans Pelicans. And they own the 17th pick via the Lakers and the 21st pick in this year's draft via the Milwaukee Bucks from the Drew Holiday and the Anthony Davis trades, respectively. Now, when you go into this New Orleans Pelicans offseason, as I just mentioned, Zion Williamson had a great season. It was amazing for him, and I'm happy that he was finally on the court and we got to see why he was the number one player. But of course, we saw Brandon Ingram just completely disappear in this postseason. And he's got to go. He has got to go because it's not working out with the New Orleans Pelicans. I quite frankly think Brandon Ingram, even though his game works a little bit well with Zion Williamson with his mid-range jump shot, his ability to create off the dribble, even run the pick and roll as a small forward, I think he just hasn't been what the New Orleans Pelicans are looking for as a star to surround Zion Williamson, to surround CJ McCollum, and he just hasn't really been that great ever since Zion has been healthy. When Zion wasn't playing, trust me, Brandon Ingram stepped up. He didn't this postseason, but overall in the generality of his time so far with New Orleans since 2020, he has relatively stepped up when Zion has been out, and he's kept the Pelicans relevant. But this season in particular, it just hasn't been that way. And now that Zion's healthy and ready to go for next season when he gets back from his injury, this fit doesn't really work, and he just hasn't been the kind of player that New Orleans is looking for, and I think they need to find somebody similar to him, maybe a DeMar DeRozan, maybe somebody else like similar to DeMar DeRozan, a Brandon Ingram kind of a guy, maybe go a little bit younger, but it just hasn't worked out for Brandon Ingram there in New Orleans, and I think that it's time to go, and I think they need to move on and mutually go their separate ways in the trade market there. And I also think they need to get a new starting center because Jonas Valanciunas has not really cut it this season. They benched him for Larry Nance Jr. Larry Nance Jr. hasn't played good. And so Valanciunas and Nance have been in and out of the lineup, but especially Valanciunas, we expected a little bit more from him as what he was supposed to be the fourth best player on this New Orleans team. He ended up looking like somebody who is just not a rotation player. And the fact that both him and Nance have killed the Pelicans on the offensive glass, have killed the Pelicans on the defensive side of the ball, they've got to get a legitimate starting center. And I know that they have the money to do it this offseason. They have a decent amount of money. I wouldn't say the most money, but they're definitely not in the luxury tax. So they have options. Maybe get a Nick Claxton, somebody who can provide a little bit of defense on the rim there. Somebody like that kind of a player who you know will bring it every day and who you know will not play inconsistent on either end of the floor. So I think a guy like Nick Claxton would work well for this New Orleans Pelicans team. So overall, I think they need to move on from Ingram, need a new starting center, and they've just got to build this team around Zion and see how it goes. And they have all these picks as well from the Lakers, and maybe they could make a move for a star player. Maybe not this offseason, maybe not even the next offseason. But I think the way the Western Conference is shaping up, I think New Orleans may have to make a move soon. I wouldn't be surprised if they made that major move this offseason, but I don't expect it. But with all those Lakers picks and their own picks, I expect them to, and the Bucks picks from Holiday, I expect them to make a move in the near future. But let's go on from the New Orleans Pelicans. So let's go to our final team, the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns have been officially eliminated, and they were swept by the Minnesota Timberwolves 4-0 in what could have arguably been said as the most disappointing season in Phoenix Suns history, the most disappointing season in, quite frankly, NBA history. We know what happened. Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, they were supposed to be the trio that was going to terrorize the league on the offensive side of the ball. Of course, all of them were injured. Mostly Booker and Beal, but way more Beal than Booker. So it was Beal being injured a lot, Booker some, Durant a little, but still injured. And those three just didn't play on the court together all season. Their record was not that great. They were the worst fourth quarter team in the league by far, and that continued to linger them in the postseason against Minnesota. And they, quite frankly, other than game 4, they really had no shot in any of the games to win. And that just shows how far away they are from winning a title. And part of that is they do not have the supporting cast around them. And I don't know how they're going to do it. They don't have the money. And going to free agency, Royce O'Neal and Bobo are unrestricted. They've got Eric Gordon on a player option, which I think he'll accept. Damian Lee, Josh Okogie, Thaddeus Young as well on player options. And they have the 22nd pick in the draft, but I just don't see where this Phoenix team can get better. I don't. They don't have the money, and they're just going to get similar minimum guys who are not going to make an impact. And I didn't really understand, if you're Phoenix, why you are extending Grayson Allen to the extent they did. I know Grayson Allen has played great for Phoenix, but you just don't have the money. And it's another shooting guard. You have 3 shooting guards on the roster right now with Booker, Beal, and Grayson Allen, and you don't have a point guard. Maybe prioritize that money for potentially getting a point guard in the offseason. Now you definitely have no money. Now you're in the second apron, and it's not even close. I just don't know what they can do to get better. And are they going to run it back? And will there be similar results? Most likely. But do you consider rebuilding if you're Phoenix? Considering Matt Ishbia, their new owner, might have pulled the trigger too soon. It's hard to do that as well because you have no draft picks. Maybe you trade Durant, Booker, Beal, get all these draft picks. Well, you might not get a draft pick for Beal, but Kevin Durant, Booker, get some draft picks, rebuild. But is that really the best option when Devin Booker is so young and has a lot of potential left? Is that really the best option? I don't think so. And I think what Phoenix needs to do is try to find a way to get rid of Bradley Beal. I don't think that's going to happen, but they must do everything in their power to get rid of Bradley Beal because he and Devin Booker are similar guys. Devin Booker's better, of course, than Bradley Beal, but those two just do not work together. And then it goes from there if you're Phoenix. Do you want to give this roster back to Booker? Start fresh, open up more money, build this team around Devin Booker, and build it up from the ground again to where you were in 2021 to win the title and have flexibility. Or you get somebody for Beal and just run it back with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and you don't trade Kevin Durant. Now, Kevin Durant is the question, of course. Do you trade Kevin Durant? Is Kevin Durant frustrated? Does he want to leave Phoenix? I don't think personally he wants to leave Phoenix. Is he frustrated that they're not winning and considering the 2 players he has next to him, that they're not winning basketball games? Absolutely. But do I think he wants to leave? No. Do I think Phoenix will ultimately have the decision? Yes. But I just don't really know what they're going to do. I think ultimately Matt Ishbia is going to say run it back. If I had to guess, they're going to say run it back, but it's really mysterious what Phoenix will do. They got swept in the first round, and they were not even close in, honestly, any of those games. I don't know what to say. There's just nothing to say. It's crickets. Like, what do you do? If I was them, I would probably, if I had to ultimately make the decision going to it now, I would probably say trade Beal, which they probably won't even do, as I said. Trade Durant and start building around Booker and freeing up some money. And because Phoenix is going to be in the luxury tax for a very, very long time. And they got all these contracts, 4-year, I think 3-year with Booker. And there's just nothing they can do about it. Unless they trade him, and I don't think they're going to trade the guys. But I think they should, because that's the only way they're going to get out of this mess. And they got to get draft picks because they have no draft picks, and they are in potentially one of the worst situations one of the worst situations for the future of the league, one of the worst teams to be the assets for the future. And it is definitely a concern for this Phoenix Suns team. And I, quite frankly, don't know what you can do. Maybe re-sign Royce O'Neal, maybe try to get some players to want to play for you, but who's going to want to play for you when you just got swept to a Minnesota Timberwolves team that hasn't won a playoff series in 20 years? It's tough, man. It's tough for Phoenix, and they're going to have to make decisions fast because this summer for them is going to be long, long, and tough. It's going to be a long and tough summer, but they're going to have to make decisions fast because it's going to go by quick for them, but it's going to be lingering for quite a while in this offseason. And I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for watching the show. And remember, please follow me on Instagram at take_your_shot_podcast_. That's at take_your_shot_podcast_. And tell me how you would have taken your shots on these takes. That's all my shots for the day, folks. Thank you so much. Leave a like and subscribe. Next episode, we're going to preview the little bit of the second round series in Denver and Minnesota. We're going to recap some game 5s and game 6s, preview potential game 7s, and we'll go from there. And that will do it today. Again, thank you so much, and we'll see you.